Welcome to IIOCS.com Food Tech Club. Today's topic is nature and control of spoilage in pickle, chutney and sauces. Food preservation requires killing or limiting the ability of microorganisms of public health significance to grow along with packaging to limit recontamination. In order to grow and produce toxins, pathogens need nutrients, the proper temperature, an adequate water supply, an environment with the proper acidity, an environment free of growth inhibitors, and the proper atmosphere, either aerobic or anaerobic. Food manufacturer, handler, or retailer can control pathogen growth by limiting one or more of the conditions needed for growth. The growth of pathogenic microorganisms in food products can be controlled by control of pH, acidity, control of water activity, chemical preservatives, control through packaging. These means often are used in conjugation with the thermal processing, that is heat treatment, to provide safe shelf-stable foods. Water activity and pH may be directly controlled in foods by adding salt, sugar or acids. Microbial growth may be stopped by adding growth-inhibiting chemicals or substances such as salt. The food is then confined in containers that eliminate recontamination with microorganisms, hermetically sealed. From a food safety standpoint, packaging serves two functions. It prevents contamination of the food and extends the effectiveness of food preservation methods. Very often, processors use a combination of these controls rather than relying on only one. This is because one control preservation system can be harsh, thus reducing the consumer acceptance of the product. The use of multiple control is called hurdle concept. The microbiological controls using pH, water activity, inhibitors, packaging and atmosphere often are used in combination during the production of sauces, dressing and condiments. Dressing, sauces, marinades, relishes, pickled vegetables and similar food products most often depend on their acidity to prevent spoilage. These foods may consist of naturally acid foods such as fruits, or they may be formulated by combining food acids or acid foods with other foods to achieve the desired acidity. Some foods such as vinegar and certain pickled vegetables develop acidity from microbial fermentation. Foods without adequate acidity could allow the growth of microorganisms capable of causing illness. The federal government regulates the manufacture of these products. Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Parts 114 and 108 regulate acidified foods. At pH of 4.6 or less, production of deadly botulism toxin by the organism Clostridium botulinum is inhibited. Foods that have a pH greater than 4.6 are low acid foods and require a much more severe heat treatment to produce a safe, shelf-stable food. Most fruits and fruit products are acid foods, and most vegetables and meats are low acid foods. Low acid foods have high pH readings. Acidified foods. Acid foods depend on one or more food acids such as citric, lactic, malic or acetic acid to achieve stability. Most acidified foods, including dressing and sauces, use vinegar, that is acetic acid, to attain the desired acidity. Vinegar is a familiar and effective source of food acid. Lemon juice is a common source of citric acid, while malic acid is the predominant acid in apples. Lactic acid is found in fermented dairy products and some fermented vegetable and meat products. Each of these acids provides different flavor profile when used in foods. When low acid foods are used in formulation, it is important that the low acid component be properly acidified before spoilage or toxin producing microorganisms can grow. The pH must reach its equilibrium value before spoilage begins. The rate of acid uptake by low acid foods can be influenced by factors such as particle size or the presence of a waxy peel. These factors often can be overcome simply by cutting the low acid food into smaller pieces. When oil is used in the formulation, the low acid components should reach equilibrium pH of 4.6 or less before the oil is added. Most food possesses a chemical property called buffering capacity that allows them to resist changes in pH. At certain pH levels, greater amounts of acid must be added to the food to continue to reduce the pH. Buffering can be useful property because it prevents changes of pH with minor variations in the amount of acid added. Properly acidified foods at pH of 4.6 or less will inhibit the growth of Clostridium botulinum and the formation of botulism toxin. Acidification cannot take the place of proper sanitation and care in manufacturing. The manufacturer must therefore adhere to the highest standards of cleanliness and product protection, adhering to the good manufacturing practices. Even if manufactured with proper acidification and sanitation, a food product can be spoiled by bacteria, yeast and molds. To prevent this spoilage, processors usually heat acid and acidified foods to 180 degree Fahrenheit or higher and package them hot. This process yields yeast and mold spores on the products and in a container and the cap. Usually, containers are inverted for a brief time immediately after filling the capping to allow the hot product to kill any yeast or mold spores that may be on the inner surface of the cap. Some products, mayonnaise, some salad dressings and other emulsified sauces cannot tolerate heating. This product requires the addition of more acid, lower the pH and chemical preservatives. Sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate are the preservatives commonly used. They are often used together to take advantage of their combined effects. Sodium benzoate is most commonly used in acid foods. Sanitation is especially important in such foods that have to be successfully marketed. All equipment should be sanitized before each batch and the cleanliness should be confirmed by appropriate testing. Sauces or dressings of this type usually are vacuum packaged or closed while back flushing with nitrogen to protect the product from discoloration and rancidity. Every microorganism has a minimum, optimum and a maximum water activity for growth. Water activity is a measure of the water available for microbial growth. The water activity is measured instrumentally using either an electric hygrometer or a dew point instrument. Yeast and molds can grow at a low water activity. However, 0.85 is considered the safe cut-off level for pathogen growth because it is the point where Staphylococcus aureus can no longer grow and produce toxin. Water activity of 0.93 is the point below which Clostridium botulinum can no longer grow. Foods with water activities above 0.85 require refrigeration or another barrier to control the growth of pathogens. Foods with water activities between 0.60 and 0.85 are classified as intermediate moisture food. They do not require refrigeration to control pathogens, but have a limited shelf life because of spoilage, primarily by yeast and mold. Foods with a water activity below 0.60 have an extended shelf life even without refrigeration. These foods are called low moisture food. Sometimes the chosen food preservation method does not provide protection against the growth of all microorganisms. In these cases, additional protection may be provided by adding chemical inhibitors. Chemical inhibitors include benzoates, sorbates, sulfides, nitrites, and antibiotics. Pickling. Pickle is an edible product preserved in a solution of common salt and vinegar. It is one of the most ancient method for preserving fruits and vegetables. Pickles are good appetizers and add to the palatability of the meal. They stimulate the flow of gastric juice and thus help in digestion. Several kinds of pickle are sold in Indian market. Mango pickle ranks first. Pickles can also be prepared from fruits and vegetables like lemon, amla, onion, cauliflower, cabbage, beans, cucumber, bitter gourd, etc. These are commonly made in homes as well as commercially prepared and exported. Fruits are generally preserved in sweetened and spiced vinegar, while vegetables in salt. The preservation of food in common salt or in vinegar is called pickling. The pickling process may also be the result of fermentation by lactic acid forming bacteria, which are naturally present in large number on the surface of fresh vegetables and fruits. This bacteria can grow in acid medium and in the presence of 8 to 10% salt solution, whereas the growth of majority of undesirable organisms is inhibited. Lactic acid bacteria are most active at 30 degrees Celsius, so this temperature should be maintained as far as possible. And this process of pickling is done in two stages. Stage 1 can be done by any of the three following methods: fermentation with dry salting, fermentation in brine, or salting without fermentation. Stage 2 is finishing and packing. Fermentation with dry salting. In this method, vegetable is treated with dry salt. The salt extracts the juice from the vegetables and forms the brine, which is fermented by lactic acid bacteria. The method of dry salting is generally: first the vegetable is washed, drained, wait for preparing pickles. Several alternate layers of the prepared vegetables and salt, like 20 to 30 grams of dry salt per kg vegetable, are kept in a vessel which is covered with a cloth and wooden board and allowed to stand for 24 hours. During this period, brine is formed by osmosis. As soon as the brine is formed, the fermentation process starts and the carbon dioxide begins to evolve. When fermentation is over, gas formation stops. Under favorable condition, fermentation is completed in 8 to 10 days. However, in cold weather, it may take 2 to 4 weeks. When sufficient lactic acid has been formed, lactic acid bacteria stops to grow and no further change takes place in vegetables. However, precaution should be taken against the spoilage by aerobic microbes, because in the presence of air, pickles scum, a kind of wild yeast, is formed, which brings about putrefaction and destroys the lactic acid. Therefore, the product may be preserved and kept by excluding air. In fermentation in brine, steeping of the vegetables in a salt solution of predetermined concentration for a certain length of time is called brining. When vegetables are placed in brine, it penetrates in the tissues of the vegetables and soluble material present in vegetable diffuses into the brine by osmosis. The soluble material includes fermentable sugars and minerals. The sugars serve as a food for lactic acid bacteria, which convert them into lactic acid and other acids. The acid brine thus formed acts upon vegetable tissues to produce characteristic taste and aroma of pickle. The amount of brine required is usually half the volume of vegetables. Brining is the most important step in pickling. The growth of the majority of the spoilage organisms and is inhibited by brine containing 15% salt. Lactic acid bacteria, which are salt tolerant, can thrive in brine of 8 to 10% strength. To fermentation takes place fairly well even in 5% brine. In a brine containing 10% salt, fermentation proceeds somewhat slowly. Fermentation takes place to some extent up to 15%, but stops at 20% brine strength. It is therefore advisable to place the vegetables in 10% salt solution of vigorous lactic acid fermentation. After fermentation process, the salt content is now increased gradually, so that by the time pickle is ready, salt concentration reaches 15%. Salting without fermentation. Vegetables are washed, prepared and mixed with salt, like 250 gram per kg of prepared material. This high salt concentration will inhibit the fermentation. Vegetables packed with large amount of salt get cured. Then they are drained and excess of salt is removed by soaking them in cold or warm water. Therefore, the vegetables are stored in a plain vinegar of 10% strength for several weeks. Vegetables can also be stored in sweetened and spiced vinegar. The spices can be added in the ground form, or essential oil of spices may be added to impart the spice flavor. At present, pickles are prepared with salt, vinegar, oil or with a combination of above ingredients with spices. In preservation with salt, salt improves the taste and flavor and hardens the tissue of vegetables and controls fermentation. Salt content of 15% or above prevents microbial spoilage. This method of preservation is generally used only for vegetables which contains very little sugar. Since the sugar content is less sufficient, lactic acid cannot be formed by fermentation to act as preservative. However, some fruits like mango, lemon, etc. are commonly preserved with salt. In the preservation with vinegar, the technology is based on the addition of food grade vinegar, which has a bacteriostatic action in concentrations up to 4% acetic acid and bactericidal action in higher concentrations. Vegetables preserved in vinegar need to reach a final concentration of 2 to 3% acetic acid in order to assure their preservation. To achieve this final concentration, a 6 to 9% acetic acid vinegar is used, as related to the specific ratio of vinegar is to vegetable. The higher concentration treatment helps to expel the gases present in the intercellular spaces of vegetable tissue. In vinegar pickles, salt 2 to 3%, sometimes sugar 2 to 5% are also added. If vinegar concentration is lower than 2%, vinegar pickles need to be submitted to a pasteurization in order to assure their preservation. Mango, garlic, chilies, etc. are preserved as such in vinegar. Vinegar pickles are the most important pickles consumed in other countries. In preservation with oil pickles are highly popular in India. They are highly spiced. In India, mustard oil, rapeseed oil, sesame oil are generally used. The fruits or vegetables should be completely immersed in the edible oil. Cauliflower, lime, mango and turnip pickles are the most important oil pickles. The pickles remain in good condition for 1 or 2 years if handled properly. The preservation with salt, vinegar, oil and spices. These methods combines the advantages of fermentation action of salt and the preservation action of both vinegar and oil. The flavoring property of spices is also made use of. The spices are usually fried in oil and mixed to the prepared fruits or vegetable before the addition of vinegar. The spices can be added separately or in the form of spice vinegar. Metallic vessels, the containers used for pickling. The metallic vessels should be not corrodable. Usually white mouth jars are used as they are easy to clean. The container should not impart any color, taste and flavor of its own to the pickle. Glass vessels, stainless steel, mono metal and aluminium containers are generally used as cooking utensils. The ladles, spoons and measuring vessels should also be of non-corrosive material. For the keeping quality, the properly brined vegetables will keep well in vinegar for a long time. The duration of brining is of utmost importance. If the vegetables are soaked for a short time of about 12 hours only, the curing of the vegetables tissues will be incomplete, with the result that pickle will not have proper texture and taste. Brining has therefore to be controlled properly. On curing, the vegetables become semi-translucent and their color changes from green to dark olive, green or yellowish green. This is an indication of correct curing. This usually takes 4 to 5 weeks. By this method, the vegetables can be kept more or less for an indefinite period, provided the right storage conditions are maintained. If the vegetable is kept in brine of 10% or less, all air should be excluded from the containers. During curing, the vegetables lost their raw flavor and became firm and crisp. Some vegetables can be stored for years in high concentration of salt solution without a serious loss in quality, though they are not stored for more than a year normally. The brine fermented products can be further processed with or without mild heat processing. During fermentation in bulk containers, microbial action influences the shelf stability. Complete conversion of fermentable carbohydrate to lactic acid and other end products renders the packaged products stable to subsequent fermentation. This is due to the presence of residual sugar, which leads to gas pressure and brine turbidity in the final package as a result of yeast and lactic acid bacterial growth. Preservatives like sodium benzoate, benzoic acid, sorbic acid and potassium bisulfate may be added to the product to enhance the keeping quality. Microorganisms, example malt, microorganisms producing softening enzymes should be excluded as they are active at pH values at which the packaged products are held. Different kinds of spoilage occur in pickles, like bitterness, the use of a strong vinegar or excess spice or prolonged cooking of spices impart a bitter taste to the pickle. Blackening is caused by iron which enters to the brine or from the equipment. Sometimes specific organisms also cause blackening. Blemishes may sometimes occur in the pickles and especially in onion pickles in vinegar. In the case of onions, white blotch is sometimes seen under the first layer of the skin. This appears to be owing either to some kind of fermentation or non-removal of all the brine prior to the final pickling of the cured onion in the vinegar. When the vegetables are placed in vinegar, it is generally presumed that the products will not spoil. In the case of onion and some other vegetables, however, sometimes the vinegar becomes cloudy turbid, thereby spoiling the appearance of the pack. These raw materials, being of a very solid structure, the acetic acid in the vinegar may not penetrate deep enough to prevent the activity of bacteria and other microbes that may be present in them. Hence, the fermentation starts from inside, rendering the vinegar cloudy. This activity of microbes can only be checked by proper brining. Cloudiness may also be caused by the use of vinegar of the inferior quality or imitation vinegar, or possible by chemical action between the vinegar and the impurities such as calcium, magnesium and iron compound that may be present in the salt used. This also may be caused by the reaction between the vinegar and minerals naturally present in the vegetable itself. Dull and faded product is due to the use of inferior quality materials or insufficient curing. When vegetables are placed in the brine for curing, a white scum is invariably formed on the surface owing to the growth of wild yeast. This scum may be thin or thick in appearance, varying from an almost imperceptible film to a thick wrinkled layer. It retards the formation of lactic acid, as this action may help in the growth of putrefactive bacteria, which causes the vegetable to become soft and slippery. It is essential to remove the scum as soon as it is formed. Addition of about 1% acetic acid helps to prevent the growth of wild yeast on the brine without any way hindering the formation of lactic acid. For this reason, some manufacturers add a small amount of vinegar to the brine in the initial stage. Shriveling occurs when vegetables like cucumber are placed directly in a very strong solution of salt or sugar or vinegar. Hence, a dilute solution should be used initially and the strength gradually increased. Softness and slipperiness is the most common form of spoilage and caused by the action of bacteria. It is invariably owing to inadequate covering with brine or owing to the use of a weak brine. By using a brine of proper strength and by keeping the pickle well below the surface of the brine, this kind of spoilage can be eliminated. Various types of physicochemical changes can impact on the quality of clear pickles. These include microbiological growth due to too low acidity or insufficient heat processing, or due to deterioration of appearance and texture due to enzymatic actions, or due to deterioration of color and flavor due to oxidative reactions. For chutney and sauce, when tomatoes of poor quality are used in the preparation of tomato products, excessive amount of molds, yeast, bacteria and fragments of insect lower the quality of the product. The insect fragment count is also highly indicative of gross contamination of the fruit and unhygienic conditions during handling and preparation of the raw materials and finished product. A minimum of 10 minutes heating the sauce with 0.5% acetic acid could ensure the destruction of spore formers, and addition of 750 ppm of sodium benzoate to the sauce would prevent microbial spoilage during storage. Sauces and purees are thick viscous liquids made from pulped fruits and vegetables. Salt, sugar and vinegar are added to the pulp to preserve the product. The sauce is pasteurized to remove spoilage microorganisms. If sauces and purees are heated further to remove more water, they can be made into paste. The acidity, low pH of the chutney prevents growth of several spoilage and pathogenic bacteria, molds and yeast. This acidity is derived from added vinegar and the natural acids of the fruit. Cooking the mixture to concentrate it lowers available moisture that is needed for microbial growth. The cooking step also kills most microorganisms that may be present. Processing the filled jars in a canner uses additional heat to kill spoilage organisms that might contaminate the product as jars are filled and to produce a vacuum seal for later storage. If the two-piece canning lid is applied correctly, air is driven out of the headspace while the jars are in the canner and a vacuum seal is formed upon cooling. For most chutneys, a boiling water canning process is adequate, but other foods may require pressure process. During storage in the sealed jar, oxygen and additional microbial contamination is kept from the product. Too much oxygen left in the jar will cause interactions with food components that lead to quality losses. For example, undesirable changes in color, texture and flavor. While preparing a chutney or sauce, it is important that the correct levels of acidity and total sugar content are achieved to ensure that the product does not spoil during storage. Selection and preparation of fruits or vegetables. First, you have to sort the fruit and vegetables. Remove those that are overripe, rotten or bruised. Leave underripe products to ripen and use at a later date. Wash the fruit and vegetables in clean water. Some fruits, particularly tomatoes, are blanched in hot water up to 5 minutes to soften the skin and to destroy enzymes and microbes. After blanching, they should cool by plunging into hot water. Some fruits should be peeled before use. Chop the fruit and vegetables into various sized pieces according to the recipe. Microbial spoilage of fruits and vegetables is known as rot, which manifests a loss of texture, soft rot, changes in color, black or grey and often off odor. Among the common post-harvest fungal pathogens of tomatoes are Penicillium expansum, Monilinia laxa and Rhizopus stolonifer. Many lactic acid bacteria strains are able to produce protein compounds with efficient antimicrobial effects, which are known as bacteriocins. In recent times, the understanding of the preservation mechanisms of the lab is being exploited for industrial production of foods because of their natural acceptance as grass, generally recognized as safe for human consumption and exhibit antimicrobial property. This is complementary effect by the production of acid and antimicrobial compounds that increases inhibition of both pathogen and spoilage bacteria. Thermal treatment and cold storage of tomato inhibit the growth and developments of pathogens and spoilage microorganisms. However, thermal treatment applied during industrial preparation of tomato products may involve various chemical reactions leading to the degradation of these antioxidants. Besides, addition of vegetable oil for the preparation of tomato sauce may lead to lipid oxidation, contributing to the micro-constituent instability. Thick sauces consist essentially of finely divided fruit and vegetable particles suspended in a thickened, spicy, slightly sweet acidic medium. The most popular thick sauce is tomato ketchup, but others such as brown sauce, mushroom ketchup and mustard sauce are also manufactured in significant volumes. Thick sauces are also used to suspend the vegetable and fruit pieces in sweet pickles. Some of the problems encountered with poorly designed manufacturing systems include spoilage, rapid color and flavor deterioration, browning, plugging in the neck of the bottle, syneresis, that's water separation by a contraction of the gel structure, particularly at air bubbles and at the product surface, and viscosity loss. Microbial spoilage is associated with inadequate temperature time conditions in the pasteurization process and or at low acidity. It is normal practice to attain a temperature of at least 88 degrees Celsius in the whole system prior to filling to prevent this. Color deterioration is largely due to classic Maillard browning effects involving reaction between reducing sugars and amino acids in the presence of oxygen. Black neck, the formation of a brown ring at the surface of tomato ketchup. It is suggested that this may be due either to Maillard browning or to a reaction between ferric iron and tannins naturally occurring in the product formulation. Oxygen is necessary to oxidize the iron to the ferric state. Deaeration and vacuum filling helps to reduce the oxygen component essential to these type of browning effects. Goodbye for today. Continue your studies with IAOCS.com Food Tech Club. For any queries, contact the number on the screen.